December 11th, 1944. The frozen fields outside Cologne, Germany. SS Hauptsturmführer Klaus Weber commanded his King Tiger tank with the confidence of a man who knew he was driving the most heavily armored vehicle on Earth. 6 inches of frontal armor, sloped at 50 degrees. The mathematics were simple and absolute. No Allied tank gun could penetrate that steel at combat ranges. American Shermans were target practice. British Cromwells were jokes. Even the new Soviet IS-2 heavy tanks struggled against Tiger II armor at distances under 1,000 yards. Weber had fought across 3 fronts. He'd survived Kursk, weathered Normandy, and led his crew through the grinding retreat across France. But he'd never lost a tank to frontal penetration. The King Tiger's armor wasn't just thick. It was a psychological weapon, a steel wall that turned every engagement into a one-sided slaughter. German tank doctrine had been built on this certainty for 2 years. Face your enemy, absorb their fire, destroy them at leisure. Then, at 8:43 that morning, something punched through Weber's glacis plate like it was sheet metal. The sound was wrong. Not the clang of a deflected round or the crack of a partial penetration. This was a deep, tearing shriek of metal giving way completely. Weber's world exploded into fire and smoke. Dragging himself from the burning wreck, chest heaving, ears ringing, he stared back at the hole in his tank's frontal armor. 6 inches of the finest Krupp steel, defeated. Impossible. Through the smoke and snow, Weber glimpsed the silhouette of the vehicle that had killed his invincible fortress. It wasn't a Sherman. It was something new, something German intelligence had never warned him about. The turret was massive, the gun barrel impossibly long, and as Weber watched in horror, it traversed toward another King Tiger in his platoon and fired again. The American 90mm gun had arrived on the battlefield, and German tankers were about to learn that their armor advantage had evaporated overnight. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. To understand what happened at Cologne, you need to understand the crisis American armor faced throughout 1944. German tank development had created a hierarchy of terror that dominated European battlefields. At the bottom were the Panzer IV medium tanks, dangerous but manageable. Above them came the Panthers, with sloped frontal armor and powerful 75mm guns that could kill Shermans at ranges exceeding 2,000 yards. Then came the Tigers, 63-ton monsters with 88mm guns and frontal armor that standard American weapons couldn't penetrate reliably. But at the apex of this steel pyramid sat the King Tiger, the Panzerkampfwagen Tiger II. It was the heaviest production tank of World War II, weighing 70 tons when fully loaded. Its frontal armor measured 150mm, roughly 6 inches, sloped at 50 degrees. When you calculated the effective thickness created by that angle, the result was armor equivalent to over 220mm of vertical plate. No tank gun in the American or British arsenal could penetrate that protection at combat ranges. The King Tiger's main armament was equally devastating. The 88mm KWK 43L71 gun fired armor-piercing rounds at muzzle velocities approaching 1,000 meters per second. It could destroy any Allied tank from the front at distances exceeding 2,000 meters. German crews called it the Königstiger, the King Tiger, and they weren't being poetic. It was genuinely the king of the battlefield, a vehicle so heavily armored and powerfully armed that standard Allied tactics simply didn't work against it. American tank crews had developed brutal but effective methods for dealing with Panthers and regular Tigers. They used numerical superiority, maneuver warfare, and combined arms tactics. 4 or 5 Shermans would engage a German heavy tank, accepting the loss of 2 or 3 vehicles to get flanking shots that could penetrate thinner side armor. It was a bloody equation, but it worked because America could replace losses faster than Germany. Against the King Tiger, even those desperate tactics failed. The side armor was thick enough to resist most American guns. The rear armor was still formidable, and King Tigers typically operated in platoons, supporting each other and covering their vulnerable aspects. American tank commanders who encountered King Tigers had 3 realistic options: call for air support and hope the weather permitted strikes, withdraw and try to bypass the position, or advance and die. By late 1944, American armored divisions were bleeding experienced crews to German heavy tanks. General Omar Bradley, commanding 12th Army Group, sent increasingly urgent requests to the War Department, demanding better anti-tank capabilities. The standard M4 Sherman, even with the improved 76mm gun, was hopelessly outmatched. The M26 Pershing heavy tank was still in development, delayed by doctrinal disputes and production challenges. Bradley's complaints joined a chorus of battlefield reports describing American tanks being destroyed at ranges where they couldn't effectively return fire. Tank crew morale was plummeting. Replacements arrived at frontline units, knowing they were being assigned to vehicles that German gunners could kill with casual ease. The psychological toll was crushing. American tankers weren't cowards, but they weren't stupid either. They understood the mathematics of armor and ballistics, and those mathematics said they were going to die. The solution was already rolling off production lines at Fisher Tank Arsenal in Grand Blanc, Michigan, but most American tank crews didn't know it existed. The M36 tank destroyer had been conceived in 1943 as a response to increasing German armor thickness. Unlike a tank, which was designed for direct combat and breakthrough operations, a tank destroyer was a specialized vehicle built around a single purpose: find enemy armor and kill it at the longest possible range. The M36's design was pragmatic and brutal in its simplicity. Take a Sherman chassis, remove the fully enclosed turret, and mount an open-topped turret carrying a 90mm anti-aircraft gun adapted for anti-tank use. The result was a vehicle that sacrificed protection for firepower. The open turret provided minimal overhead cover. The armor was thin compared to a proper tank, but the 90mm M3 gun-firing armor-piercing ammunition could penetrate German heavy armor at ranges that would have been suicidal for a Sherman. The 90mm M3 gun had been developed originally as an anti-aircraft weapon, designed to bring down high-altitude bombers. Its ballistic characteristics were exceptional: a long barrel, high muzzle velocity, and excellent accuracy at extended ranges. When Army Ordnance engineers examined the gun for potential anti-tank use, they recognized its potential immediately. The same characteristics that made it effective against aircraft, high velocity, and flat trajectory, made it devastating against armored vehicles. Firing the M82 armor-piercing ballistic cap ammunition, the 90mm gun achieved a muzzle velocity of 853 meters per second. The M82 round used a hardened steel penetrator weighing approximately 11 kilograms. When that much mass moving that fast struck armor plate, the kinetic energy was phenomenal. Testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground demonstrated that the M82 could penetrate 170 millimeters of vertical armor at 1,000 meters. Against the King Tiger's sloped frontal armor, with its effective thickness of 220 millimeters, the numbers were tighter. But at combat ranges under 1,500 meters, the 90mm gun could punch through. For the first time, American forces had a weapon that could kill King Tigers frontally, engaging them at distances where German crews thought they were invulnerable. Production of the M36 began in earnest in July of 1944. The first vehicles reached European ports in September, distributed initially to separate tank destroyer battalions attached to armored divisions. American doctrine called for tank destroyers to operate as mobile anti-tank reserves, responding to enemy armor concentrations rather than leading attacks. But in the fluid combat of late 1944, M36 crews found themselves thrust into direct engagements much more frequently than doctrine intended. The crews selected for M36 service were experienced tank destroyer veterans, men who had operated earlier vehicles like the M10 Wolverine with its 3-inch gun and the M18 Hellcat with its 76mm. They understood the fundamentals of hull-down firing positions, range estimation, and first-shot accuracy. But the 90mm gun demanded new skills. Its greater range and power meant engagements at distances where target identification became difficult and ballistic calculations more complex. Training emphasized the M36's strengths and limitations. The vehicle could kill any German tank at combat ranges, but its thin armor made it vulnerable to return fire. Crew survival depended on firing first, firing accurately, and repositioning immediately after each engagement. The open turret, which crews initially viewed as a dangerous liability, proved advantageous in some situations. It provided excellent visibility and allowed faster egress if the vehicle was hit. German intelligence services were slow to recognize the M36's significance. Initial reports described a new American tank destroyer with a large caliber gun, but German analysts assumed it was another incremental improvement, like the M18 Hellcat. The Abwehr's technical intelligence section examined battlefield photographs and concluded the vehicle mounted a 76mm weapon, underestimating its capabilities by a substantial margin. This intelligence failure was compounded by German tank crew reports that seemed contradictory and unreliable. Some units reported American vehicles destroying King Tigers from the front at long range. Other units encountered M36s and successfully destroyed them with return fire, leading intelligence officers to conclude the vehicles were not particularly dangerous. The reality that a thinly armored vehicle could mount a gun capable of defeating the King Tiger's frontal armor seemed improbable to analysts who thought in terms of balanced designs rather than specialized roles. The first large-scale deployment of M36 tank destroyers came during the Battle of the Bulge, Germany's desperate winter offensive launched on December 16, 1944. German forces had concentrated their remaining armor reserves, including substantial numbers of King Tigers from heavy tank battalions, for a massive surprise attack through the Ardennes forest. The objective was to split Allied armies, capture the port of Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace before Germany's industrial collapse became irreversible. American forces in the Ardennes were thinly stretched, resting and refitting after months of continuous combat. The German attack achieved complete surprise, smashing through American positions and creating panic in some sectors. But among the reinforcements rushed to stabilize the collapsing front were M36-equipped tank destroyer battalions. These units would write the 90mm gun's reputation in the blood of German heavy tank battalions. The morning of December 19th brought clearing weather and renewed German attacks near Stavelot, Belgium. SS Kampfgruppe Piper, spearheading the German advance, had been delayed by fuel shortages and American resistance. Their column included King Tigers from the 501st Heavy Tank Battalion, assigned to punch through any remaining American defensive positions. Piper's orders were simple: break through to the Meuse River bridges before American reinforcements could arrive in strength. Blocking Piper's route was Task Force Lovelady from the 3rd Armored Division, including the 703rd Tank Destroyer Battalion, equipped with M36s. The American position was hastily prepared, with tank destroyers hull down behind the frozen ridgeline overlooking the approach route. The German column appeared through the morning mist at approximately 900 hours, King Tigers leading, their commanders confident that American forces lacked weapons capable of stopping them. Staff Sergeant Eugene Benoit commanded the lead M36 in the 703rd's defensive position. His crew had been in Europe less than 3 weeks, rushed forward to replace casualties from earlier fighting. The King Tiger that appeared in Benoit's sight was the first he had ever seen outside of intelligence photographs. Its size was shocking, visually wrong in the way massive objects seem impossible when you first witness them directly. Benoit's gunner, Corporal Thomas Fischer, had trained extensively on the 90mm gun's ballistics. He estimated range at 1,400 meters, adjusted for the slight downslope, and waited for the command to fire. American tank destroyer doctrine emphasized patience. Let the enemy close to ensure first-round hits, then destroy them before they could locate and engage your position. At 1,200 meters, Benoit gave the order. Fischer fired. The M82 armor-piercing round struck the King Tiger's glacis plate slightly left of center. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, smoke began pouring from the tank's engine deck. The crew bailed out, abandoning their vehicle. Fischer had achieved what German tankers considered impossible: a frontal penetration of King Tiger armor at combat range. The second King Tiger in the column, commanded by SS Unterscharführer Wilhelm Meyer, identified Benoit's position and returned fire. The 88mm round struck the M36's thin armor and penetrated completely, killing 2 crew members instantly. But before Meyer could fire again, another M36 from the 703rd engaged him from a different angle. This round struck the King Tiger's turret face, penetrating and causing a catastrophic ammunition fire. Meyer's tank burned completely, the fire so intense that nothing remained but the blackened hull. The engagement lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, 5 King Tigers had been destroyed or disabled. The 703rd had lost 3 M36s, with 14 casualties among the crews. But Kampfgruppe Paper's advance had been stopped. The surviving German tanks withdrew, unwilling to push forward against weapons that could kill them frontally. For German heavy tank commanders, the psychological impact was devastating. Their armor superiority, the one advantage that made sense of Germany's deteriorating strategic position, had been negated. The pattern repeated across the Bulge battlefield throughout late December. M36-equipped tank destroyer battalions engaged German heavy tanks at ranges and in situations where earlier American vehicles would have been helpless. The 638th Tank Destroyer Battalion destroyed 11 King Tigers near Mannheim. The 823rd accounted for 8 more around Bastogne. American crews learned to exploit the 90mm gun's superior range, engaging German tanks from hull-down positions at distances exceeding 1,800 meters. German after-action reports reflected growing confusion and frustration. Tank commanders reported being engaged by American vehicles that could penetrate King Tiger armor from angles and ranges previously considered safe. Some reports described American tanks, which was technically incorrect. The M36 was a tank destroyer, not a tank. But to German crews under fire, the distinction was meaningless. What mattered was that American forces now fielded a weapon that could kill King Tigers, and German doctrine had no effective counter. The intelligence failure was compounded by German command decisions. Even as battlefield reports described King Tigers being destroyed frontally by unknown American weapons, German tactical doctrine continued to emphasize frontal engagement. Tiger commanders received orders to hold positions and engage enemy armor directly, trusting in their superior armor protection. This played directly into American tank destroyer tactics, which relied on long-range engagement from prepared positions. By January of 1945, as the Bulge offensive collapsed and German forces withdrew, the King Tiger's reputation for invincibility had been shattered. German heavy tank battalions reported morale problems among crews who no longer trusted their armor to protect them. Some commanders requested permission to engage American positions only from extreme ranges or from covered approaches, tactics that negated the King Tiger's advantages in armor and firepower. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The industrial mathematics behind the 90mm gun's success revealed deeper truths about the war's trajectory. Germany had designed the King Tiger as the ultimate expression of armored warfare, a vehicle so heavily protected and powerfully armed that it could dominate any battlefield. But that design philosophy required resources Germany no longer possessed in sufficient quantities. Each King Tiger consumed materials and manufacturing capacity that could have produced multiple Panzer IV or assault guns. American doctrine took the opposite approach. Rather than building heavier tanks to match German armor, American industry produced specialized vehicles optimized for specific roles. The M36 tank destroyer couldn't survive direct combat with a King Tiger in an open engagement. Its thin armor guaranteed that German guns would penetrate on the first hit. But in its intended role, engaging enemy armor from prepared positions at maximum range, the M36 was devastatingly effective. Production figures told the story. Germany manufactured approximately 490 King Tigers during the entire war, a number limited by complex manufacturing requirements and resource shortages. The United States produced over 2,300 M36 tank destroyers between July 1944 and the war's end. American industry could field specialized tank killers faster than German factories could build the heavy tanks those destroyers were designed to eliminate. The 90mm gun's development represented American industrial pragmatism applied to battlefield problems. Instead of designing an entirely new weapon system, Army ordnance adapted an existing anti-aircraft gun for anti-tank use. The M3 90mm had been in production since 1940, with thousands manufactured for anti-aircraft defense. Converting the design for tank destroyer use required modification rather than complete redesign, saving critical development time and manufacturing resources. This approach to weapons development reflected American industrial advantages in ways that Germany couldn't match. By late 1944, German tank design had become trapped in a cycle of increasing complexity. Each new model attempted to address battlefield problems by adding more armor, more powerful guns, better optics, and fire control systems. But increased complexity meant longer production times, higher resource costs, and more complicated maintenance requirements. The King Tiger exemplified this trend. Its Maybach HL 230P 30 engine, producing 700 horsepower, was chronically unreliable. Transmission failures were common. The overlapping road wheel design, intended to distribute the vehicle's immense weight, created maintenance nightmares in muddy or frozen conditions. Crews reported that basic repairs requiring hours on a Panzer IV demanded days on a King Tiger. The tank was magnificent when it worked, but mechanical breakdowns disabled more King Tigers than enemy fire during the final months of the war. American tank destroyers like the M36 used proven Sherman components wherever possible. The chassis, suspension, engine, and transmission were direct adaptations from M4A3 production. This meant mechanics trained on Shermans could service M36s without additional specialized training. Spare parts were interchangeable across vehicle types. When an M36 broke down, recovery and repair used the same procedures and equipment as Sherman maintenance. German heavy tanks required specialized recovery vehicles, unique spare parts, and extensively trained mechanics. The logistical burden of maintaining King Tiger battalions consumed resources far beyond the vehicles themselves. The contrast became apparent in operational readiness statistics. American armored divisions in Europe typically maintained 70 to 80% of their vehicles in operational status at any given time. German heavy tank battalions rarely exceeded 50% readiness by late 1944. Mechanical failures, shortage of spare parts, and lack of adequate recovery equipment meant that King Tigers were often abandoned or destroyed by their own crews when they broke down during retreats. Captain James Harrison commanded Company A of the 638th Tank Destroyer Battalion during the Rhineland campaign in early 1945. His unit had received M36s in November 1944 and spent 2 months learning the vehicle's capabilities through hard combat experience. Harrison kept a detailed journal that survived the war, providing insight into how American crews adapted to the 90mm gun's potential. Harrison described the psychological transformation that occurred when his crews realized they could engage German heavy tanks on favorable terms. Earlier in the war, encountering a King Tiger meant calling for air support, artillery, or attempting to bypass the position entirely. With the M36, American tank destroyer crews could take the initiative, setting up ambush positions and engaging German armor at ranges where return fire was less accurate. The key was understanding the M36's limitations. Harrison emphasized to his crews that they were not tanks and should never fight like tanks. The vehicle's thin armor meant that any German hit would likely penetrate. Survival depended on seeing the enemy first, achieving first-round hits, and repositioning immediately after firing. Crews that forgot these principles died quickly. Crews that embraced them became exceptionally effective tank killers. Harrison's company destroyed 23 German tanks during February and March 1945, including 7 King Tigers. His success rate reflected doctrinal discipline more than raw firepower. His crews selected firing positions with careful attention to cover, concealment, and escape routes. They waited for optimal engagement ranges, typically between 1,200 and 1,600 meters, where the 90mm gun's accuracy advantage was greatest. And they coordinated with infantry and artillery to suppress German supporting weapons that might target their exposed positions. German responses to the M36 evolved slowly, hampered by intelligence failures and doctrinal rigidity. Some panzer commanders began avoiding frontal engagements, attempting to maneuver for side shots against American positions. But this played into tank destroyer tactics, which relied on prepared fields of fire and mutually supporting positions. When German tanks maneuvered, they exposed themselves to fire from multiple M36s, positioned to cover different approach angles. Other German units attempted to suppress American tank destroyer positions with artillery before advancing. This proved more effective when German forces had sufficient artillery support and ammunition. But by early 1945, German artillery was critically short of shells. Battery commanders received strict ammunition allocation limits, forcing them to prioritize targets carefully. Suppressing suspected tank destroyer positions consumed ammunition that might be needed for defensive fire missions. The most effective German counter to the M36 was the Jagdpanzer tank destroyer, particularly the Jagdpanther mounting a long-barreled 88mm gun in a heavily armored casemate. The Jagdpanther's low profile and thick frontal armor made it difficult to detect and engage. Its gun could destroy M36s at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. But Germany produced fewer than 400 Jagdpanthers during the entire war, and mechanical reliability problems limited their battlefield effectiveness. The Jagdtiger, mounting a 128mm gun, was theoretically the ultimate counter to American tank destroyers. Its massive gun could destroy any Allied vehicle at almost any range, but only 79 Jagdtigers were completed before war's end, and most were lost to mechanical breakdown or fuel shortages rather than combat. The vehicle was so heavy, nearly 75 tons, that it broke roads and bridges, limiting its tactical mobility. Technical Sergeant Robert Carlson, a gunner in the 703rd Tank Destroyer Battalion, provided one of the most detailed accounts of M36 combat effectiveness. Carlson's crew destroyed 11 German tanks during the war's final months, including 4 King Tigers. His diary entries, preserved in the National Archives, described the practical realities of long-range tank combat with brutal clarity. Engaging a King Tiger at 1,500 meters required precise range estimation, careful attention to ballistic tables, and steady nerves under pressure. Carlson described the moment between firing and impact as eternal, watching the trace of the armor-piercing round arc toward the target, waiting to see if his calculations were correct. A hit on the glacis plate usually meant penetration and catastrophic damage. A hit on the turret face could penetrate or ricochet, depending on the exact angle of impact. Carlson noted that German return fire was typically less accurate at extended ranges. The King Tiger's 88mm gun had excellent ballistics, but German optics and fire control systems had deteriorated in quality by late 1944. Shortages of high-quality optical glass forced German manufacturers to use substitutes that reduced clarity and range-finding accuracy. American optics, benefiting from superior industrial chemistry and quality control, gave M36 gunners an advantage in long-range engagements. The psychological dimension of tank combat emerged clearly in Carlson's accounts. German crews, accustomed to armor superiority, often hesitated when engaged at long range by weapons that could penetrate their protection. That hesitation, measured in seconds, gave American gunners time for follow-up shots. Carlson described instances where King Tigers withdrew after being hit once, even when the damage wasn't catastrophic, because crew confidence had been shattered. German intelligence finally captured intact M36 vehicles during fighting near Aachen in late January 1945. Technical examination confirmed what battlefield reports had been indicating for months. American forces had fielded a 90mm gun capable of defeating King Tiger frontal armor at combat ranges. The analysis reached Wehrmacht High Command in early February, accompanied by urgent requests for tactical guidance. The response revealed how thoroughly Germany's strategic position had collapsed. Wehrmacht directives acknowledged the threat posed by American 90mm guns, but offered no effective countermeasures. Tank commanders received orders to avoid engagement ranges between 1,200 and 1,800 meters, precisely the distances where M36s were most effective. They were instructed to close rapidly to ranges under 800 meters, where German advantages in armor and close-range firepower might prevail. But executing such maneuvers under fire proved impossible in most tactical situations. Some German commands attempted to concentrate their remaining King Tigers into specialized breakthrough units, using them for specific offensive operations rather than distributing them across defensive sectors. This approach preserved the vehicles for critical moments, but surrendered the psychological advantage their presence provided to frontline infantry. German soldiers reported feeling more vulnerable when they knew heavy tank support wasn't immediately available. The final vindication of the 90mm guns' effectiveness came during the Rhine crossing operations in March 1945. German forces defending the river had concentrated their remaining armor reserves, including every operational King Tiger in the Western Theater. American and British intelligence estimated approximately 60 King Tigers remained in service, supported by larger numbers of Panthers and Panzer IV. The 999th Tank Destroyer Battalion, equipped with M36s, participated in the crossing near Remagen on March 7th. German counterattacks attempted to destroy the Ludendorff Bridge before American forces could establish a substantial bridgehead. King Tigers from the 506th Heavy Tank Battalion led the attacks, advancing through the rugged terrain that limited American maneuverability advantages. Staff Sergeant Michael Brennan's M36 destroyed the first King Tiger to approach the bridgehead at a range of 1,350 meters. His shot struck the glacis plate at an oblique angle, defeating the armor and causing an internal ammunition fire. The King Tiger burned completely, blocking the narrow approach road and forcing subsequent German tanks to maneuver around the wreck. This created opportunities for other M36 crews positioned on the bridgehead's flanks. Over 3 days of intense fighting, the 999th destroyed 14 King Tigers attempting to break through to the bridge. American losses included 7 M36s and 23 casualties among tank destroyer crews. But the bridgehead held, providing the foothold that American forces needed to pour armor and infantry across the Rhine into Germany's industrial heartland. German after-action reports from the Remagen fighting revealed complete demoralization among surviving King Tiger crews. Unit commanders reported that crews refused to advance against confirmed American 90mm positions, even when ordered. Some crews abandoned their vehicles, claiming mechanical problems that subsequent inspection revealed to be minor or non-existent. The psychological collapse of German heavy tank forces was as complete as their tactical defeat. The broader implications of the 90mm guns' success extended beyond individual engagements to affect strategic planning and national morale. For American forces, the M36 represented proof that industrial capacity and technical innovation could overcome qualitative deficiencies in individual equipment. The Sherman had never been a match for the King Tiger in direct combat, but America didn't need better tanks. It needed better tank destroyers, and the M36 fulfilled that role brilliantly. For German forces, the 90mm guns' appearance symbolized the hopelessness of their strategic position. They had designed and built the most heavily armored tank in the world, consuming resources desperately needed elsewhere, only to watch American industry counter it with a specialized vehicle produced in overwhelming numbers. The King Tiger's invincibility had lasted less than a year before American guns could defeat it frontally. German technological superiority, the one advantage that might have compensated for numerical inferiority, had proven to be an illusion. Production statistics from the war's final months illustrated the industrial imbalance. In March 1945, American factories delivered 374 M36 tank destroyers to European theater forces. That same month, German factories completed 41 King Tigers, most of which never reached combat units due to fuel shortages and Allied air interdiction. American industry was outproducing German tank manufacturing by nearly 10-to-1 in the specific category of vehicles designed to kill heavy tanks. The human cost of this industrial equation was written in casualty statistics that shocked both sides. German heavy tank battalions in 1945 suffered casualty rates approaching 70%, losses that would have been catastrophic for any military formation. But for elite units like SS heavy tank battalions, which received the most experienced crews and best equipment, the losses represented an irreplaceable drain on Germany's remaining military expertise. American tank destroyer battalions also suffered heavily, with casualty rates around 40% in units that saw sustained combat. The M36's thin armor meant that crews survived by skill and luck rather than protection. But American replacement systems could absorb these losses, training new crews and delivering replacement vehicles at rates that sustained operational effectiveness. German training systems had collapsed completely by early 1945, meaning that lost crews couldn't be replaced with men of comparable skill. Lieutenant Colonel William Schmidt, commanding the 638th Tank Destroyer Battalion, wrote to Army Ordnance in April 1945, describing the M36's battlefield performance. His assessment praised the 90mm gun's effectiveness against German heavy armor, while noting persistent problems with the vehicle's mechanical reliability and crew protection. Schmidt recommended that future tank destroyer designs incorporate overhead armor for the turret and improved engine cooling systems. These recommendations influenced post-war American tank destroyer development, though the M36 itself remained in service through the Korean War. The vehicle's ability to engage enemy armor at extended ranges proved valuable against North Korean and Chinese tanks in the early 1950s. But by then, American doctrine was shifting away from specialized tank destroyers toward medium tanks, mounting 90mm guns, like the M46 Patton and M47. The technical legacy of the 90mm gun extended far beyond World War II. The weapon's ballistic characteristics, high velocity and flat trajectory, combined with sufficient projectile mass to defeat heavy armor, became the foundation for subsequent American tank gun development. The M3 90mm directly influenced the design of the M41 90mm gun used on the M47 Patton tank. That weapon, in turn, informed development of the M68 105mm gun that armed M60 tanks and early M1 Abrams variants. Modern American tank guns, like the M256 120mm smoothbore, trace their conceptual lineage to the engineering principles established with the 90mm M3. High muzzle velocity achieved through long barrels and high-pressure propellants, dense penetrator cores for maximum kinetic energy transfer, careful attention to accuracy and fire control, systems to ensure first-round hits at extended ranges. The formula perfected against King Tigers in 1945 remains the foundation of contemporary armor warfare. German survivors of the war's final tank battles carried memories that shaped their understanding of why Germany lost. SS Oberscharführer Heinrich Müller, who commanded a King Tiger at Remagen, survived the war and provided testimony to American historians in the 1960s. Müller described the psychological impact of realizing that German armor superiority, the one tactical advantage that made sense of continued resistance, had been negated by American industrial capacity. Müller recalled specific moments when his faith in German technology collapsed. Watching American shells punch through King Tiger frontal armor from angles and ranges where penetration should have been impossible, seeing veteran crews panic and abandon their vehicles after single hits, understanding that no amount of courage or skill could compensate for the fundamental imbalance between German resources and American production capacity. For Müller and thousands of German tankers who survived, the 90mm gun represented more than just an effective weapon. It represented mathematical proof that Germany had lost the industrial war that ultimately determined military outcomes. American factories could produce specialized tank killers faster than German factories could build the heavy tanks those destroyers were designed to eliminate. The equation was simple, brutal, and decisive. American tank destroyer crews who fought with the M36 remembered the vehicle with more complicated emotions. They recognized its effectiveness and appreciated the advantage it gave them against German heavy armor. But they also remembered the casualties, the friends killed by return fire that their thin armor couldn't stop, and the constant stress of knowing that survival depended on firing first and accurately every single time. Staff Sergeant Eugene Benoit, who had destroyed the first King Tiger at Stavelot, survived the war and returned to his home in Louisiana. In interviews conducted in the 1980s, Benoit described the M36 as the best bad vehicle I ever operated. Best because it could kill anything the Germans fielded. Bad because it offered almost no protection if the enemy got the first shot. Benoit noted that M36 crews developed superstitions and rituals around firing sequences, range estimation, and positioning procedures. These weren't based on technical knowledge so much as desperate psychological attempts to impose control over situations where death was always one German shell away. The broader narrative of the 90mm gun's development and deployment illustrated how America fought World War II, not through superior individual equipment, but through industrial capacity, technical innovation, and the ability to produce specialized weapons systems in overwhelming quantities. The M36 wasn't a better tank than the King Tiger. It was a better solution to the specific problem of killing German heavy tanks while minimizing American resource expenditure. This approach to warfare focused on efficient production and specialized roles rather than perfect all-around designs, became the foundation of American military doctrine throughout the Cold War. Rather than matching Soviet tank production tank for tank, American forces fielded combined arms teams where tanks, tank destroyers, infantry fighting vehicles, and attack helicopters each performed specialized roles. The M36's legacy wasn't just technical, it was doctrinal, influencing how America thought about armored warfare for generations. The final chapter of the 90mm gun's World War II service came in May 1945 as German resistance collapsed. M36-equipped tank destroyer battalions participated in the final drives into central Germany, encountering steadily declining German resistance. Many King Tigers were found abandoned by their crews, out of fuel or broken down, silent testimony to the collapse of Germany's industrial capacity. Captain James Harrison's company encountered the last King Tiger they would face on May 4, 1945, near Pilsen in Czechoslovakia. The German crew had abandoned their vehicle after running out of fuel during withdrawal from American forces. Harrison's men examined the intact King Tiger with professional curiosity, measuring armor thickness, inspecting the gun breech mechanism, and marveling at the sheer mass of the vehicle. Harrison noted in his journal that the King Tiger represented magnificent engineering applied to a losing cause. The tank was superbly designed within the constraints of its design philosophy. But that philosophy, emphasizing individual vehicle superiority over producibility and sustainability, had proven fatal to German military effectiveness. Harrison concluded that the M36, despite its flaws and vulnerabilities, had been exactly what American forces needed. Not a perfect vehicle, but an adequate one that could be produced in sufficient numbers to overwhelm German qualitative advantages. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.